guys on the ground. Another reminder of that is this article from NewCoin. They say the U.S. government is developing a matrix-like world simulating the virtual you. Well, they've been doing this for a very long time. This is nothing new. They do keep coming up with new, improved programs, however, but the intelligence and the approach has been there for a very long time. They say it's not surprising that data in the information age can be extremely valuable, even a source of power. That's how they will master you, is through the data they collect on you. Now, the concept they call sentient world simulation. And here's what they point out. They say that sentient world simulation is actually a continuously running, continuously updated mirror model of the real world in parallel on a computer designed to predict and evaluate future events and courses of action. In other words, all this is about predictive crime. This is all about predicting what you're going to do and shut you down before you do it. And of course, it's also about activity-based intelligence. All the human domain analytics, the activity-based intelligence, it all collects your operations moving about in the physical world, as well as what you do on social media and your metadata. And they go on to say that U.S. defense, intelligence, and homeland security officials are involved in constructing this project. Again, we see the admitted merging of these three branches, the police state, the surveillance state, and the military, all merging together. Finally, they say the project is dangerous and intrusive enough that one of its researchers even quit, citing concerns about the possibility of handing over such a dangerous weapon to a top secret agency with little accountability. Actually, it should say with no accountability. The centralized control of personal and social information by a single entity gives it immense and unprecedented power. That's what we need to be concerned about. That's what we need to be concerned about with all these different branches of government. But it's the consolidation. It's being done domestically. And this is the power of dragnet surveillance combined with the military. As General McRaven had pointed out, they only need to put in a linear number of nodes on the ground. That's these boots on the ground for intelligence in order to get exponentially greater information. He says that this is achieved with a signature footprint of special operation forces. So it's not about a large footprint. It's about what special forces bring in 80+ countries around the world, sometimes with only a couple of operators at remote locations working face-to-face with our partners. So when you look at that in that context, the idea that they would bring 60 people into one small area in Bastrop or 1,200 people into Texas is actually quite large. Now, finally, when we look at what's going on and we look at this exercise combined with the fact that the Patriot Act is coming up for reauthorization, is it any wonder that we're seeing a lot of reports about terrorist threats coming up? In an article on INFOWARS today, we have dubious ISIS terror threats as the Patriot Act comes up for reauthorization. And they have a quote here from Ronald Bailey, where he says, "The threat of terrorism by homegrown jihadis is minimal. As Mother Jones pointed out in 2013, there's only been 17 people killed in Islamic terrorists in the U.S. since September 11th, 2001 atrocities. And terrorism, even on the scale of 9/11, does not pose an existential threat to our country. However, the growth of turnkey totalitarianism does." And of course, although Mother Jones won't say it, 9/11 was about creating the environment so they could create turnkey terrorism. Well, stay with us right after the break. We're going to come back and we're going to talk about a tragic incident with vaccines in Mexico, as well as a cancer vaccine they're touting coming out of Cuba. What's that all about? We'll have that information when we come back. Stay with us.
A chemical spill contaminating the water supply in 9 West Virginia counties.
What are the health effects of having these drugs in our drinking water?
It's forced medical treatment without the consent of residents.
My friends, water filtration is one of the most basic actions you can take to protect you and your family from the harmful toxins and heavy metals in your tap water.
On average, the county says it sprays with the glyphosate at least once a week.
Few filters cut out the glyphosate that is found in water supplies worldwide. Remove pesticides, herbicides, chloramines, hydrofluorosilicic prussic acid, sodium hexafluorosilicate.
Fluoride, it is in tea, it's in coffee, it's in water, it's in bread, it's in toothpaste.
It is our responsibility to protect our families. The establishment's not going to do it. It's time to take action. It's time to filter our water.
Go to InfoWarsStore.com today, and for a limited time, use the promo code WATER20 and get 20% off all ProPure products. Again, that's InfoWarsStore.com, or give our crew a call at 888-253-3139.
The knowledge of the ancients, tried and true, trusted herbs and extracts fused with the latest nutraceutical science. Introducing the all-new Ancient Defense Herbal Immunity Blend, crafted with over 14 key ancient herbs and extracts to supercharge and prepare your body for what experts admit is the most dangerous season of the year. We have rejected hundreds of other formulations in our quest to bring you what is simply the most powerful and comprehensive proprietary formula that we have ever created in the realm of herbal immunity. For the last 2 years, our team has been working with top doctors, nutritionists, and chemists to develop the ultimate nutraceutical formulation. Experience the benefits of combining over 14 ancient herbs and extracts with exciting new advances in nutraceutical science. For a limited time, get 25% off on this introductory offer. Visit ancientdefense.com or call 888-253-3139. ancientdefense.com.
Welcome back. Now, as a reminder of what can go wrong with any medical treatment and why we need to have informed consent from those of us who are getting the medication, CNN reports that 2 babies have died and dozens have been hospitalized after vaccinations in southern Mexico. They say Mexican health officials are investigating after 2 babies died and 29 children were hospitalized from suspected adverse reactions to shots from the country's national vaccination program. Now, that's about 60% of the children who were vaccinated at this particular location. They say the parents of the 2 infants who died were so outraged at the government that they refused to let authorities perform autopsies. They say that illnesses were reported after 52 children from the rural mining community were given vaccines for tuberculosis, rotavirus, and hepatitis B. Later that night, 31 of the children presented adverse reactions. Residents said the vaccinations were offered on Friday when officials came to the community and announced over loudspeakers that vaccinations would be given to newborns. So it doesn't sound like they had a choice in that. They were just told that they were going to be given to the newborns. Is it kind of this thing like, shut up and just take your damn vaccine? That's what we're seeing. But of course, in America, we need to understand that the vaccine companies have been given immunity from any problems that come out of their vaccinations. You may not get immunity from the disease, but they will have legal immunity if they damage you. So they're going to have to stick a gun to our heads in order to do it, and that's what they're planning on doing. Now, remember when we look at this, that there have been questions in the past, going back to November of last year. We had an article on InfoWars.com. Is the UN using vaccines to secretly sterilize women all over the globe? Now, in that article, we pointed out that vaccines given in Mexico and the Philippines were a little bit suspicious. Now, this is a different situation than the infants that were given multiple vaccines and then 60% of them had adverse reactions. This is also being done, however, in Mexico and other third world countries. They say that what's suspicious about this is that only women are vaccinated, and only women between the ages of 15 and 45, in other words, childbearing ages. They also found a particular hormone, HCG, in the vaccines, and of course the WHO, the World Health Organization, has been actively involved for more than 20 years in the development of an anti-fertility vaccine utilizing that same hormone. And they tied it to tetanus toxoid as a carrier, the exact same coupling that's been found in the Mexican, Philippine, Nicaragua vaccines. Something for us to think about. And as we look at this, remember that there's been a lot of buzz in the last few days about how Cuba has some kind of a miraculous lung cancer vaccine. It turns out that it isn't all that miraculous if you look at the details. Of course, Wired reports Cuba has a lung cancer vaccine and America wants it. Actually, it's really Big Pharma that wants it. They want to force you to buy it. And they ask a question in the article, which I think is a good question. How did Cuba end up with cutting-edge immuno-oncology drugs? Okay, this is a country that is incredibly poor. Well, it turns out, if you read the article, they don't really have much of anything, I don't think. They say that lung cancer is the 4th leading cause of death in Cuba. Of course, they smoke a lot of cigars. They say that these shots are extremely cheap. They say each shot costs the government only about $1. A phase 2 trial from 2008 showed lung cancer patients who received the vaccine lived an average of 4 to 6 months longer than those who didn't. 4 to 6 months. That's all this vaccine will give you. It's not very effective. Now, it also isn't very expensive in Cuba. It's probably going to be a lot more expensive when it comes to America. But the gist of these articles that are hailing this as some kind of a magnificent breakthrough are really about selling the idea of socialist medicine. They go on and on and on about how Cuba has done so much with so little because they're communists. That's what's really behind this. So they're selling that agenda. And of course, they want to sell an ineffective, potentially dangerous vaccine in America, and they will sell it for a lot more than $1 a piece. It hasn't done anything to keep lung cancer from being the number 4 killer in Cuba, and at the very best, it will give them 4 to 6 months additional. Now, how do we stop this kind of medical tyranny that would force us to take things without our informed consent? Realize that the other side of that, of course, if they can make you take something without your informed consent, they can also withhold things that you would like to take that you think might help you. Things that are experimental drugs, or perhaps things that are prohibited by fiat, like medical marijuana. The answer is nullification. The New American has an article that came out today. Nullification is spreading. Minnesota invalidates FDA restrictions, and this is all about nullifying restrictions on typical medications or medical treatments that the FDA has not approved. This comes from a Minnesota rep who had an incredible experience when he was 15 years old. He was told that he only had months to live. He was informed he would not be able to get a heart transplant, but he was told by his doctors that he might be saved by a surgical procedure that was still experimental. He said, "It was my right to try it. I fully believe that life is worth fighting for, and government has no role in getting in the way." So this Minnesota State Representative Nick Zerwas has now pushed through a law that will allow others to do what he did, what saved his life. And bear in mind the Oregon senator, who is also a doctor, who did something very similar in her life. She was told by her doctor, as well as the pharmaceutical company, that she should not take interferon for her condition while she was breastfeeding. Nevertheless, she did her own research. She went against the advice of her physician. She went against the advice of the drug company, and she took that medication, interferon. She would not allow other people, though, to have informed consent when it comes to vaccines. She would take that away from all of us. So what he is doing here is the other side of this, allowing us to take medications, some of them experimental, without the permission of the FDA. Because right now, you can take some experimental drugs from the FDA, but you have to get express prior approval from the FDA. Now, understand, that is tyranny. Look at what our founder said. Jefferson said that whenever government assumes undelegated powers like this, the power of life and death, the power to tell you whether you can take a drug or the power to force you to take a drug, it has no authority. It is void. It is of no force. That is the principle where states nullify an overreaching federal government that is doing things which it has no legal authority to do and for which it has no moral authority, quite clearly. And of course, that's backed up by the 10th Amendment. Now, in other news, we see candidate Jeb Bush coming out and saying that he would have invaded Iraq, just like his brother. That's why we don't need another SOB as president, another son of a Bush. He says that pointed out that the Democrat frontrunner Hillary Clinton also voted for authorization for the use of force in Iraq before the invasion. Well, I would say we don't want her either. I don't think so. But anyway, he says, given the intelligence that we were confronted with, pretty much everybody would have done that. See, what they would not do is question the intelligence. They would never question what they get from the CIA, is what he's saying. I guess he's concerned that maybe if he did, he'd be labeled a conspiracy theorist for being a skeptic, for wanting information, for doing research, for digging down and seeing what's really behind this. No, just go along with the consensus no matter what happens. Now, he was in Liberty University lauding his Christian conscience this weekend. who is telling them that that was one of the most important things you can have. He says there's no more powerful or liberating influence on earth than a Christian conscience in action, implying that that's what he has. It says he didn't talk about his efforts as governor to save the life of a severely brain-damaged woman, Terry Schiavo, whose husband sought to remove her from her feeding tube over the objection of her parents. Quote, that made him a hero to the Right to Life movement, said Jerry Falwell's son. Well, you know what? Didn't make him a hero to me. Didn't make him a hero to a lot of people in the right